Okay, good morning, everybody. So we're doing chapter 2. The topic is business analytics, and it's going to be about documentation and flowcharts. Okay, so we're going to discuss business models and what does it mean, activity models and BPMN, you'll see diagram, and identify the process and participants, and also to understand the flowcharts and be able to prepare flowcharts. Okay, so that's very important and part of eventually you're going to be doing audits, and you have to understand that the accounting office and the function of every person at work, what are exactly their jobs, and if they understand the business process well. So the change in the role of accountants in business. Okay, I gave you last week, an example of QuickBooks and how the changes are affecting the economy and everything that's going on with since the corona started. How businesses sometimes changed from retail to wholesale, and all the time we should realize that the accountant position, what he used to be, just doing, okay, I'll do bookkeeping, I'll do accounting, I'll prepare the financials, and I'll be done. It's not true anymore. The roles of accountant these days is really to help the businesses streamline the flow of paperwork and how to process information much faster. Okay, so we're all using computers, and data analytics is very important in understanding data. So rapid changes in the technology, of course, increase availability of so much data, and we'll have business intelligence system, ERPS system. Information produced by system must support the information required by the enterprise for decision makers. Accountants involved in supporting that. So many times an accountant will be involved in strategic planning, improve the process, and compliance. So improving the process, of course, means that you will have to understand the process first. So businesses have to understand sequences and how, the business is flowing. And then we will see if something is being repeated, we will have to say it's not efficient. So that's part of the rules of an accountant. Accountant nowadays does much more consulting and holding the hands of the people at work. So there will be a lot of regulatory compliance. Of course, we need to prepare paperwork, finance and accounting, tax return. So all of this will be part of planning and budgeting and forecasting. So we always give more advice for the future. So it's not just prepare the financial statements right now or prepare the tax return right now. You're always giving them a better planning for next year, how to save taxes for the future. Stakeholders assurance, financial reporting and analysis, anybody that's going to rely on my paperwork, I want to give them good reports and many notes that they would be clear about how the business is doing. Investor relationship, providing management information and performance management. Raising capital and loans, of course, you'll have to deal with people. Risk management from strategic operating includes fraud risk. Using IT to make finance and investment appraisal. Cost management, supply chain and management. So that's statutory reporting. Okay, so we said that changing the jobs of accountants in general, that we constantly have to improve and understand the business flow. So understand business and how it's collects and summarize, communicate business information, understand how the business delivers value to the customers, understand the risk that the business faces, and the internal control in place to mitigate those risks. So internal control audits are audits that recently happened in the past 10 years, and they're very popular. And there's also a job of internal control auditor. You have to understand the internal control well. Internally, it means inside the company, and to see if there's risk and saying something is not doing, it's not being processed right. Understand how accounting information system collects, summarizes, and reports business process information. So we're going to understand business process. What is the business process? Sequence of business activity that use resources to transform input into output, of course, to achieve the business goals. So business process could be selling inventory to the customer. That's a business process. And our goal is to make a profit. So business processes, most of the time, you're going to be using verbs. when you explain a business process. Business analysis is the process of defining business process requirements and evaluating potential improvement. How can we do it faster? Let's say from the minute somebody calls me until he's out the door, until he's being serviced and helped and so on. Business simple abstract representation of one or more business process. And we keep documentation because we want to understand the flow. So a documentation means a tool of information, transmission, and communication. So we're going to deal with business process, business analysis, model, and documentation in this chapter. And the name of, it's called documentation really, the chapter, but we're going to deal with flowcharts to understand the flowcharts. So what does documentation includes? Business process model, business rules. So business rules is what's the representation of like, what's your job at the company? User manuals, training manuals, and that will help to train employees in the future. Product specification, to explain about the product and what exactly it's supposed to do. Software manuals, schedules, organization chart, and strategic plans. So a lot of documentation. And the reason you have to understand this is eventually you're going to take an audit class. All of these will be in your auditing paperwork. You need to have organizational charts. You need to have explanation of the business process. You need to interview employees to make sure that they feel doing the business rules. So all of it is to prepare you eventually for an audit. Okay, so Sarbanes-Oxley in 2002 made documentation more essential for business. So we're doing more paperwork, not less. Requires manager to assess and attest the business internal control structure and procedure. So managers are responsible to say that I know what each employee does and how the internal control is being followed. Required external auditor to audit management assessment of the effectiveness of the internal control. So that gave the job of the internal control audits that I was just talking about. So it started after Sarbanes-Oxley in 2002 because of all the big scandals of Enron in 2001 and WorldCom. And there were so many scandals in those years. So many corporations were under investigation. Because documentation is going to support us. So employee training will be a booklet about what do you give to each employee. Let's say the person is a cashier. So there will be a specific training for a cashier. If it's the job is account receivable person, the flow of transaction, you will give them a training. It might be a week, it might be 2 days. It depends on the job. Internal and external audit requirements. Everybody needs to know that they're going to be accountable. So it's accountability. Standardized communication with enterprise. Standardized communication between the enterprise and its customers, suppliers, and stakeholders. So this is letters that are going between us to, let's say, customer. If we gave them credit approval, so there will be a standardized letter. If there was any communication we need to send, there will be standardized letters to be sent between the business to the stakeholders. So facilitates process improvement. Effectiveness. Are the outputs obtained as expected? Efficiency. We want to do it in fewer processing, and we just efficiency is always to work the best way and not to duplicate this process by too many people. Internal control, are the controls working? If you have a good internal control, it means that you're more secured, your assets are secured, people are not stealing from you. So good internal control, it's tight and you have more signatures and more people oversight. So that's good control. Compliance. Do you process and you comply with constant tax laws? So if it's, let's say, state tax, sales tax change, are you in compliance? If it's payroll tax changes, are you in compliance? You have to constantly be in compliance. So in compliance means, let's say you're using, I don't know, for payroll, you're going to use ADP or you're going to use other companies. They will constantly change to the tax forms. So if something changed, they will be following the regulations. If you do it on your own, you have to do it and to make sure that you're following the correct rules. So what is the value of the business models? You have to understand that you're going to explain things in words, but to really bring a person from point A to point B. Imagine you have to give somebody directions without a map. So how many words would take you to give information to, let's say, drive from Los Angeles to San Diego? Without a map, you have to put it in sequence. And so the same idea, like imagine the business model is how many words you will have to say instead of the same information that you see on a map. So business process and system can also be difficult to describe. So we need to remember to try to simplify it. Always give simple words like, I'm doing this process is entering an invoice. So work with verbs, enter data or pay the bill, simple processes. And of course, you've seen some flow charts already on QuickBooks. It's enter purchase order and then receive inventory and then receive inventory or enter inventory against the bill, things like that. So that's definitely a business process. So business models like the map should be important features in the business process, and they should be clear and concise. Remember, all these slides are given to you on Blackboard under PowerPoints, and this is Chapter 2, Accounting Information System. Okay, so organizational changes, including mergers, acquisition, outsourcing, offshoring. What does it mean? Businesses change all the time. Sometimes we realize that entering the information in-house is just too much money. So we will outsource it. We will just take all the scanned invoices and scan them straight to maybe a person in India, and he's entering all this information. Many use cloud-based, completely cloud-based. So outsourcing made sense to some companies. Product innovation, changing the product, continuous process improvement. Always we want to improve our business and to work faster. Change, however, can be expensive and risky. So examples of the past 8 months, many businesses realized that they're not making money as retail, and some of them became wholesalers because businesses were closed, many little stores were closed, and they found completely different channel there to reinvent themselves to become wholesaler or direct to the customer or completely online business, and they're not used to it, including accountants. Many businesses changed and the accountant as well. Accountant changed to providing all the services online, meeting the clients by Zoom. Many businesses changed. So we have to update and really be up to date with the risk and what's going on. And sometimes it is expensive to change this layout and the way your business runs, but you have to manage a team of people working from home. Many things that changed, but you have to implement it and minimize the cost and the risk. So you still have to take signatures from clients, things like that. So you make paperwork, you make platform for them to send it. So business models create value by providing communication, training, analysis, and persuasion tools. So presenting information more concisely and clearly with written description. Managing complexity by incorporating only essential element, eliciting a requirement when they use to interview involving parties, reconciling viewpoints by providing an integrated view, simulating potential changes, specifying requirement. Okay, so we have to understand the business process, and all this will give us value. Remember, we're keeping documentation. We need paperwork on training, analysis, whatever we're doing, we're going to have paperwork on it. That will make simple and also will be cost effective for the future. Okay, so this is the type of business model. We have the business rules, like what people are supposed to be doing, activity models, business process models, and structure models. So you'll see flow charts in a couple of minutes and how we're reading them. Okay, activity models started even in before 1920. So every business has a business process and the design constantly changing, but it started well before 1920. So it's a sequence of workflow in the business process, represents sequential flow of control logic of set of related activities. What should you be doing and how you're implementing it? So it's tools, planning, documenting, discussing, and implementing systems. Okay, so the first one we're going to discuss is flowcharts, how to read flowcharts. By the way, this topic is still also on the CPA exam. So flowchart is still being used. You will need to know how to read them and understand that some of them activity or some of them the beginning point, end point, things like that. And of course, it's another way of saying flowcharts is also data flow diagrams. It's a diagram that shows you how the information flowing, business process maps, and IDEFO function models. Okay, so we're going to concentrate on the beginning on flowcharts. So activity models must be described, events that start. Let me see. Okay, so that's the first one, activity models. We're talking about flowcharts. So activities and tasks within the process. Okay, we remember activities you have to describe with verbs. I'm doing this, or task also, it's a verb. Sequence of flow between tasks. What should you do between? And if you have options and things like that. Decision points that affect the flow. This division of activity depending on the organizational roles. So sometimes you will have to split it and say two people are doing this. You're going to do A and I'll be doing B. So that's the division of activity. Okay, BPMN stands for Business Process Modeling Notation. Business Process Modeling Notation. And it's again was started to use after Sarbanes-Oxley. It started in 2002, Sarbanes-Oxley, and this was in 2004. Specifically designed to, really for process modeling, designed to understand by the business people. So we're trying to use across the board terms that people will understand across the board. Software available to support modeling sequence and process simulation. What does it mean? The last bullet, you know it. You've seen arrow keys moving from 1 to 2 to 3. Let's say you're doing account receivable. It says enter sales order. And then the next is enter an invoice. And after that, receive payment. And after you receive payment, make a deposit. So that's with a sequence of an arrow key showing you go next, next. That's the software really ability to take the business process and stimulate it into that sequence. So good business model is basically that they should follow the standards, that they are clear, complete, and concise. Okay, so the process logic should result in similar models, but most of the time people following the same models. So we start with some point and we end with some point. And you'll see the rules starting now. So the basic building blocks of a flow chart. You need a start, intermediate, and an end. So we usually starting with, there are circles. The question is what they look like. So beginning of a process is always a regular regular circle that has one frame, one round circle. Intermediate will be double circle, that's in the middle of the work, and the end is a bold circle. In between, we're gonna have different jobs, but just to recognize that the circles are starting the process. So start, intermediate, and end. Activities always represented by, it's kind of a rectangle with circles, rounded rectangle. You see the rounded circle, rounded corners, I mean. So the rounded rectangle will be always inside, usually a verb, an activity, like enter an invoice, pay the bill. So each activity is described with a short verb phrase. Activities are always in verbs. Okay, so we know that the circles are start. Activities will be in a rounded rectangle. And between them, we are going to use sequence flow, which is arrows. So arrows indicating progression of activities. Sometimes you're going to see dot, 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 arrows that are dashed. You will have different process. Maybe it's a broken sequence, but it's really still a flow that this should go next. So anytime you want to sequence flow, use arrow key. Okay, so in between, we have gateways. That means that it's usually splits and branches out. So gateways means that there are a couple of options what to do. A gateway would be, this symbol would means that we're going to have two different ways to continue. do this or do that. It's like or most of the time. So the first gateway shows branching. So branching into two different ways. Okay, so this is an example of a flow chart that we just discussed the rules. So we see the circle in the beginning. That's a start. Customer presents the item. Okay, so the customer comes to the cashier and presents the item. He puts them on the counter. Okay, so the person, the cashier, scans the item and identify the payment method. So he's asking, how would you pay? So then the payment method could say cash or credit. If it's cash, accept the cash, return the cash, deal with the cash, give the change back and things like that. The gateway, the second one says just credit card. So process the credit card, sign and continue. Okay, so then another gateway is branching. You could do at the end, bag the item, and then it's the end. The customer is ready to leave. So this is an example of a simple flow chart the cashier has to understand. I do have a choice, what should I do and how to do it. And this will be part of the training of the next cashier. Okay, so then we have an example of a pools and swim lane. Identify participant in the process. Pools identify organization. Lanes identify department or individual within the organization. Task activities are assigned to one participant to show responsibility. Each pool must include one start and one end. The sequence flow must not break between the start and the end. So here's an example of pool with two swim lanes. So they do activity number one, activity number two, activity number three. Even if you start together, let's say in an office, and then we split into giving activity to different people. So activity 1, 2, and 3, they can go back, and activity 4, discuss what they accomplished, and then you end. So this is an example of a pool of information, and you can have, you can even simplify this. Let's say this was an actual swimming class. So you have swimming lane 1 and swimming lane 2, and you have activity 1, 2, and 3 that you're teaching them to blow bubbles, let's say, and then you're teaching them to just make the hand stroke and then the feet strokes. And the activity 4 is they swim till the end of the pool. So many examples can work, but the point is to work seamlessly together. It has to have a start and it has to have an end. And you're going to discuss it. So I would say that most of the time they use this to pull the people together. And maybe you start in an office and you come back to their office to discuss how it went, activity 1, 2, and 3. And then you end it with a summary. What exactly happened? What did you achieve? And how we can learn from this. Okay, so that's the exchange between two participants. So sometimes you have two people, sometimes it's two groups, two teams. It's very popular to manage a lot of teams these days. So message flows are shown in dashed line with an arrow on the destination. So that's what I'm talking about. When you see not a regular arrow key, you're going to have a dashed line. So that's a message flow. Okay, so messages, and especially now we need to know more about, because people are communicating with emails a lot. You have to understand that sometimes you will see the dashed more than direct arrows. Okay, example, they took over here two different pools. One is the patient point of view, the second one is the doctor office. Okay, so the doctor office gets a call, may I get an appointment? And you receive the request. So receive the request, start processing the request, and talking to them on the phone, which insurance do you have, and all that. Assign the appointment, give the appointment, and the conversation. So this is from the point of view of the, let's say, front desk who's just doing appointments. From the point of view of the patient, he's starting feeling sick, he requests an appointment, and he talks to the office, obviously. He gets an appointment and he ends the call. So we want to process this. Now, why is it important to check all that? We want to check efficiency and effectiveness. Many times we find out that when we analyze this, you think it's very simple, but many times when we analyze this and do some research and talk to patients, I've been to a doctor office that it's been very difficult to get an appointment. The staff in the front was terrible. And the doctor asked, he asked me on the appointment, what do you think about my staff and everything? So I really told him that it's so hard to get an appointment and how difficult your staff and unfriendly they are. And he needed that feedback from people because he wasn't sure why it's so hard to get an appointment, why you waited so long. So examples like that is very important. So we want to make sure that the people that are working and doing this process are efficient and effective. And I'm sure you're going to get more and more on that about, research. Are they doing well? Rate my performance, rate my office, things like that. So of course there's training and they want them to work better and more efficient. Okay, so usually the models are very interesting in an external pool, yet they remain concerned about the message flow between the pools. We want to know how long it takes. So they sometimes time it. How long did it take from the patients to call till the end? Did you leave them on hold 15 minutes to wait for an appointment? Did you, things like that. So they want to make sure that the flow is great, especially when you're dealing with a doctor that is inside the hospital and you have to go through the hospital first. So a lot of things need to be processed. Okay. So a start means that it presents a token, and the token must be able to flow through the process for a potential pay to the path, and then it reaches the end of the event. So tokens are only travel along the sequence flows. So we need to understand that you're just going to flow forward. You're never going to go back. Okay, so examples of gateways that have different symbols inside. Exclusive would be just a gateway that the diamond or the shape is going to be without an X inside. For branching, exclusive will be only simple empty or with an X. It means you cannot do two of them. Inclusive, when you have a circle, it means you're branching to two different ways. You could do this or that. Parallel gateways, it means you could do both. You could do this and that. Examples of this. Okay, so I'm planning to go on a trip. Okay, so I'm planning a trip to travel. And this is exclusive because I see the X in the middle, so I cannot choose both. I can't fly or rent a car. It's either one. I cannot do both. So, or you're flying, so let's say to Florida, or you're reserving a car and you're driving to Florida. So you cannot be both. Okay, or if I could do this example is, let's say, travel by train or travel by flight, but I cannot do both. So you have a choice between them. Let's say the college is paying for my travel to a training session. So they plan a trip, they give me, it's either one. We will pay up to a certain amount on the train, or if you travel by flight. But sometimes you get both, that you travel and you have to do both. You get to reserve a flight to Florida and you also rent a car to be there for a week. So sometimes it's not either or, you have to may involve both. That you get there and then you have to rent a car as well. So if the travel has to be completed by both, you first reserve a flight and you also reserve a rental car. This is the symbol inside the circle that tells me that it's going to be inclusive, probably both. Okay, parallel, that you have to do, of course, all three at the same time. What does it mean? You're going to be in the hotel, you need to reserve the flight to get there, and you need to reserve a car to be there for a couple of days. So the trip involved a week, then it needs to be reserve the hotel for a week, reserve in and out, and reserve the rental car. So the parallel is that big plus inside. Okay, so with messages, now with emails, you can use these start messages using begin process and incoming messages coming in and out. So you have examples of the regular circle, we know it's a start. So they put an envelope in a regular start. Intermediate, we know it's a double circle. Double circles, these are intermediate. What's the difference between the white envelope and the black envelope? White is starting the event and black is throwing events. I'm throwing a party. So example, receive the message with external, you're getting external paperwork. Okay, end of the message would always be a dark. So we're going to finish with dark line. So you're throwing the event because the black envelope and you have a completely bold circle. Okay, circles with time is a timer event, that the event must start at a specific time. So like example, we're meeting for a specific budget, monthly budget. So of course it has to have information in a timely manner. Next, intermediate indicates delay in the process until specific time. We still need to get more bills or we still need to get expenses that we didn't know. Wait for it. If you're seeing like a Z inside an intermediate one, that means it's an error. There was an error in the event. And that gives you a problem. So you have to discuss it and say how to continue. So here's an example. External participant comes in, he requests, he receives request. We evaluate his request. Okay, so I'll give you an example of, let's say a student send an email and he's asking for a recommendation letter. Okay, let's say that. So I got the request from external, from a student. I received the request. I evaluate the request, send them an email back. If it's yes, I would do a recommendation, or no. Most of the time I say yes. Evaluate the request. After evaluating the request, I'm going to start doing intermediate, something about it. I'll send them, okay, send the email to directly, and usually it's come directly from the other sources, so the other schools, and I will get a confirmation, and again, intermediate, another email. Do something is write the reference letter and submit it by email, and then you're done. So that's the flow evaluation of this process. Okay, time boundaries. Okay, boundaries is really the example of time and intermediate. This one is a time boundary because it says like it's a picture of a time clock inside the intermediate. So we plan a party. You have to wait because you're planning the party 2 weeks before the party. Error, Corona happened. Cancel the party. I cannot do 500 people. I have to cancel the party. And if the 2 weeks and then all of a sudden you're allowed to hold a party of 15 or 20, then hold the party and then you end the session. So you have a choice between, sometimes you have to cancel the party and sometimes you'll have to hold the party. Okay, so that's the examples of these basic flowcharts. So remember, activities are usually in a rounded rectangle. That means you're in the middle of a sub process. So these are activities. See over here, activity, 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 3 activities. Looping activity, parallel activity, and sequential. What does it mean? Okay, so the first one says sub-process name with a plus. Sub-process contain other detailed process that are hidden from view. An expendable sub-process shows that we have other activities included and supposed to be connected into the event. So you have gateways between, this is activities that are related. A looping, something that you're going to do it again and again. Its condition needs to be until the condition is satisfied. Such as keep on sending an email until all the emails are done, or check all emails and you're doing this daily. That's part of an example of a looping. Parallel, a parallel multi-instance task performed several times at the same time, such as when several different people perform the same task at the same time in the process. So that's a parallel way. Maybe 2 employees checking something at the same time. Sequential is several sequences such as instructor grades test, and I'm doing it over and over. That's a sequential one. So I have midterms and I have 50 midterms to grade, and I'm in sequential. I have to work in sequence. Finish number 1, 2, 3, like that, but I'm repeating the same thing. Okay, so symbols that you still need to recognize. A data object looks like a paper with a corner folded. A data storage, it looks like this to store the data. And we talked about it before, this dashed arrow is an association connecting data object stored to an activity. It's the flow that's necessary, that you should go to the next step. Example, okay, we start. We want to buy concert tickets. So the start is to buy the concert ticket. You have to wait. That's a symbol of waiting to the concert. Maybe the concert is in 2 weeks. Attend the concert, and then you're done. So buy the ticket, keep the ticket until you attend the concert. So time passes between, and that's the time constraint that we have over here, the time boundaries. But it's a simple flow of buying concert tickets. Okay, so the point is to really focus on the business process at the time. Be very clear about identifying what you're doing, the start until the end. Include the essential element that you will not do anything to distract you, to avoid something. And label the activity with verbs. And I told you it's going to be simple verbs, an object like pay invoice. Get feedback if it wasn't so accurate or there was a step needed. So that's important. Okay, why I'm telling you all this, let me try to share another screen. Okay. The reason I'm showing all this, because eventually you're going to be doing a lot of data analytics in businesses. And this is very helpful for data analytics. Okay. So later on, you will have to understand internal control. You will talk to the human resources, which is people. Watch employees. It kind of sounds like ghost employees, but you'll be watching the employees, following processes, vendor management to make sure there's no fraud schemes and things like that. And you'll be using many different types of software. Some of you will be using Tableau. Some of you will be using Ultrix. Some of you will be using Power BI. Power BI is very similar to Excel that we were doing already. So title, many times in accounting information system, you'll be doing much more than you plan to initially. And all these are just to give you the idea, if you have understanding of flowchart, you'll be doing it much better. Many times the flowchart is to clean the information, clean the data, and process it faster. So it's very helpful. Okay, let's go to other examples of flowcharts. Okay, I want to show you that there are so many jobs available in internal control as well. Let's see an example. Okay, here's another example of flowcharts. Start order chicken, biscuits, and then this is an example, let's say, of just a regular waitress. So the person is ordering chicken and then they want coffee, so she has to order the coffee again, finish the order, give them the bill, or receive the order, and she's following the full order. So this is an example of a simple flow chart. Okay, we go back. Okay, so I told you that internal control, there's many positions, starting an internal control manager, and this is one example. Internal control manager in a company called Smart Cookies. I'm not saying it's true, it's just an example. But here's the responsibilities I want you to read about internal control. It's reaching the manager of internal control to establish, maintain SOX internal control environment. Position requires an individual with strong accounting and documentation skills. So if you have both skills like that, you will be responsible to establish and maintain documentation, track and support the accounting team, identify risks, perform periodic reviews, work collaboratively with multiple departments, and you being the liaison between external and internal audit. And the job salary, you could see it's between 110 to 130,000. So this is many jobs opened up because of these documentation control and because of SOX. So most big businesses need a compliance officer, they need an internal auditor, internal control audits, and sometimes they do it external. Sometimes they don't hire a manager to do internal control. They have internal control audits, and the controller in the company does also a manager of the internal control. He keeps track of it. So organization structure needs to be done. Many, many different things needs to be done. So now we're going to change to internal control. I hope you can see this. I'm sharing it right now. Okay, so internal control. I want you to still discuss this and read chapter 10 about data warehouses. Then how you put all the information in, you're getting operational information, external, putting all of it as a data warehouse, and then you could send it into more specific sub data, I would say, that you're sending the information whenever they need it. So you're processing it better. Very important for eventually marketing. So an example over here, the data warehouse is often designed to facilitate decision-making. Output might include variance reports, trend reports. So it helps a lot in management, preparing budgets and things like that. Okay, so I want you to read about gathering information, making decision. Here's an example for business intelligence. How would Tesla use the business intelligence to find indicator of quality issue? How would Dunkin' Donuts they decide to track information of potential franchise? How would they know where to open the next stores? How would Morgan Stanley use business intelligence to price the initial offering? Because an initial basic offering, you have to come up with a price, but based on what? Especially if it's a internet retail industry. So all these business intelligence, they collect a lot of data and they process them. So they need to know more about the stock market, the condition, economy, everything about before they do the initial public offering. Here's data mining. Okay, so it's a lot of different indicators that I want you to read. Here's a good dashboard. Dashboard has it. Also, we have a dashboard in QuickBooks. Dashboard is to see your picture of your business in one complete setup, like a profit and loss in a graph, account receivable in a graph. This is in a graph. This example of a dashboard is about marketing, trials and non-trial, and leads and web users, and they process it information from many different sources. And they're going through Facebook, Twitter. You see over here, you have all this information. So this is a marketing dashboard. Okay, financial reporting in XBRL. XBRL is extensible business reporting language. It's based on XML language, a standard of internet communication between businesses. So XBRL has databases available for various companies. Many people that are filing by SEC, IRS, they are getting information that way. Also it's like a standard language that they would have between loan officers. So they're using the standardized report, like the 10K. And it's just easier to understand across the board the same specific paper when we're dealing with stocks. So here's financial reporting using XBRL. Again, this is chapter 10 in the PowerPoints that I gave you. And you have all these terminology that I'm explaining here. So reporting is independent, system is independent, and you still have flexibility. So this is about XBRL and data warehouses again, reviewed, and that's it. Okay, so to read about data warehouses, business intelligence, how we going to work your information, analyze data and process it. And that's of course, many different companies using data analytics and people that are doing data analytics. Digital dashboard tracks critical firm performance. And I like to do that on QuickBooks. It will show you performance report. Okay, I'm going to try to get into QuickBooks for a minute. No, okay, it's not this one. I'm going to do a share of something else. Let's see if I can get to it. Okay, so on Blackboard, I opened the wrong one. Yes, here. Okay, I hope I'm sharing the right thing. Yes, fine. So I'm going to share with you where you're going to find all this information. Doesn't matter if you're class A, B, or C. Everything that I gave you that I want you to read is here. You go to PowerPoints and scroll down after all the QuickBooks. We still have to do chapter 15 and 16, and I have a video on that I'm going to give you next week. Account Information System book, chapter 2, flowcharts. That's the topic I was doing today. Chapter 9, data analytics we did last time, but today I skipped to reporting process as well. I want you to read it. And the rest is internal control. Okay, so it's chapter 11, internal control. Okay, so from the internal control, let's see if I can do it. And I lost it. Resume share. Okay. So internal control basic is the control concept, and you will have the risk and explain the risk. So we talked a little bit about internal control, that it started with Sarbanes-Oxley. These are the governors corporations, the AICPA, ISICA, Information System Audit and Control Association, Institute of Internal Auditor, Institute of Management Accountant. So all of these organizations you're going to have, plus the PCAOB, very important, Public Company Accounting Site Oversight Board. PCAOB gives, it's basically working with auditing standard, and that established after 2002, after Sarbanes-Oxley. PCAOB is another way of saying that there is compliance, there is oversight, and you're following with that. So PCAOB is very important if the company has, of course, mutual funds, stocks, and all that. So it's not for every company. Okay, so we have to remember there are stakeholders, people that are relying on information, and they're relying that it's honest and true. So we need to have preventive control, detective controls, corrective controls, how to fix the problem, and constantly have backups, and should not have really lack of control is people are stealing or breaking the information or causing us to lose a lot of information. So preventive control is most of the time authorization, like passwords, access, you have no access, so key entry, codes like that. Detective control is the problem when something like we need to do bank reconciliation every month, and the same thing with monthly trial balances. If you're doing that, you will find, like I would say, red flags or alerts very early. What happened here? How come we lost so much money this month? So detective controls are very important. And then when there is a problem, remember to go back. Sometimes you need to go from the backup and start fresh because you have corrupted data. So always having daily backups are very important. People keep it in the cloud and they don't, not losing any information. Okay, so general control, application control. I want you to read all this. So your assignment will be on Blackboard. It will be about internal control. To give me a company that you read about in the recent, any kind of company, doesn't matter. If they did computer crime, I prefer, of course, related to accounting, but you're going to prove to me how they tried to avoid this from happening again. So what was wrong in the internal control and how they can fix it. Okay, so I'm putting it on Blackboard. You should use exactly the slides I'm showing you now to answer it. Okay, also another slides that I gave you. Okay, these are very good. You also have another slides that are in the same place. Let me share it again. The topic of internal control is explained right here. Internal control, it's still a PowerPoint, but it says internal control accounting 21. It used to be accounting 21. So open this one. This will give you rules of internal and will help you find the answers to what I want. Internal control, like I would ask, what is collusion? When two people working together, you have to define it, you'll find it. What are the signs that's an employee stealing from you? You have it right here. So the slides definitely will tell you how to answer these questions that I'm putting on discussion board. Okay, there's no different instruction for Mac users because this is totally not on Black. It's not on Connect. It's not on Connect this time at all. It's on Blackboard. Let me see if I can share Blackboard again. So it doesn't matter if you're a Mac user or not. You're reading my PowerPoints anyway. Okay, where's my Blackboard? I have too many windows open. Just a second. Blackboard. No. Okay, here's Blackboard. Fine, you're sharing Blackboard, good. Okay, so discussion board is right here on Blackboard. The second one, I might switch it to an assignment. So it might not be on the discussion board and you might see it on an assignment. So I'm going to copy this to an assignment. It doesn't need to be so long. Of course, it's the date will be fine. It's about, you have until December 12th to do it. So please read the PowerPoint internal control and also the internal control that I just showed you today. Discuss the following: what is collusion, why it's so harder to detect, and define fraud. Basic definition of fraud. So these are three little answers. But I want you to take a case of fraud or computer crime or kickbacks that you read recently. So you can Google even accounting scandal in 2019, let's say. I don't want the big Enron story from everybody. But show how Sarbanes-Oxley should have been preventing that problem, which means lack of internal control, exactly, and how we're using the internal control to prevent it in the future. So make it like a big 3 paragraphs, okay? If somebody wants to mention Ponzi scheme in the past couple of years, that's also okay. But explain what is a Ponzi scheme and how to do it. Usually would have done, in a real class, we would have done presentation. So here you don't have to talk about it, you just have to send it to me. So you can send a Word document, you can send a Word document, you can also send a PDF if you prefer to do a PowerPoint, that's fine. But as long as you're answering all this. Okay, so that will be, I'm moving it to an assignment right here. It will be assignments. So I decided to switch from discussion board to an assignment. And we're done for today. Any other questions?